professional planner, I've worked through for about the last 36, 37 years in the profession. I've been lucky to have been involved in quite a large number of fairly high-profile jobs and projects. Projects that you'll probably be very familiar with, from things like King's Cross Central through to the Francis Crick Institute, which was the 2017 RTPI Silver Jubilee Cup winner, through to Embassy Gardens, the new development around the new American Embassy. I started my career, as many did, in the public sector, where I was a development control officer at Runnymede Borough Council, rose to the dizzy heights of senior planner before I was approached with an offer of a job in the private sector. I did that for a few years until I became a victim of the 1990 recession. I went travelling, and whilst travelling I ended up in Chile and worked with CONAF, the National Forestry Corporation in Chile, which works for the government, and spent quite an interesting time there before returning here to the UK to work for a developer specialising in retail and commercial developments. After a while, the private sector attracted me back, and I went back to work at CBRE, beyond that Bidwell's, and then more recently RPS. I've been lucky that I've had quite a good cross-spectrum of project work that's taken me forward, but of course as I've moved in my career, and particularly up that ladder, I'm sort of latterly at RPS, the MD for the planning division, which is about 240 odd people across 7 different professions. I think taking that together, that sort of gives you a good idea of the fact that I have a broad spectrum of understanding the issues that exist in various different sectors, because I've experienced most of them. I think the other element about it is that some of the project work has included working with local authorities themselves, so being back in the fold of actually having to understand how the local authority and officers work and working with officers directly. But I think those skills are ones that you would expect from any career professional. I've been lucky that I've also had a second career running parallel to my town planning career as an Army Reservist. And I rose through the ranks as in the Army Reserves to become ultimately the CEO of my own regiment, for which I was awarded an OBE in 2006 for leadership. But I think the element that I have learned out of the military environment, and they often in their recruitment say that the skills that they teach you relate to your civilian career as well. I think that's actually quite true, because they've taught me about strategy and the development of policy and how you take information, which we do on a day-to-day basis, but rather than formulate it into perhaps project-related strategy, actually into policy making and strategy making, and not of the planning type. And it's taught me that I can actually do that, present it, and actually interrogate and understand what it is that I'm bringing forward. I've also been lucky that I've had other opportunities through the career as well. So for 5 years I acted as a visiting lecturer to Reading University, delivering the site planning module of the master's course. I was invited to be part of a number 10 think tank on housing delivery. I've appeared at a parliamentary select committee and been interrogated by them, which, by the way, this is worse. And I've had a real interest in the development of people through their careers. So from graduate recruitment and development through to introducing career pipeline training and development for all grades within the last 3 companies for which I've worked. I think one of the key elements in all of this is the fact that we've got some really good networks already established, and networks that the Vice President particularly will actually be engaged with. That's the national as well as the regional panel meetings that take place, as well as the groups such as the Young Planners, Women in Planning, and the Main Planners Network. Outside of those, we've got aspects such as the Planning Officers Society, where we can actually go and actually listen to what people's views are. I think it's also a place where we can table what the Institute's intentions are, and also feedback some of the ideas that we're bringing forward, as well as some of the policy that we are adopting. It's a really good mechanism, and I would look to see and use that completely. I think I also, and I would also want to seek to use things like a role within the new Planner magazine when it's revamped, and also within the social media side. I think there is the opportunity here to get out and about, and I think that's really an important role for the Vice President to actually go and meet members face to face in whatever environment that you can think of. I think from this particular element, what I would say is that my biggest challenge in the sense of stakeholder engagement really related to a project which was an estate renewal and a council-owned development where I was actually acting for the council themselves. The estate that we were looking at was one which was one of the more problematic ones in the local authority concerned. More than 50% of the local residents and tenants were illiterate, and English wasn't the first language of the majority of residents either. So we had to take a very different approach to the way that we would engage, and a lot of thinking obviously took place. What we sought to do was to actually look at some of the complaints, some of the comments that had been received through the housing department as to what was wrong with the estate, and so what we might be able to address through the proposals that we might bring forward. Rather than doing your traditional stakeholder engagement, we actually put a series of tables and chairs out in one of the public areas and invited people to come in and talk to us. We had blown up photographs of the estate so that they could actually talk and point to the right areas. And what we did on the first session was to actually go for a walk around the estate with the architects and graphic artists and translators, listen to what people had to say, and actually sketch things out actually on the photographs themselves so they could have an idea of what was happening. When we went back, what we sought to do was to actually lay out on the ground as best we could where we would see new buildings take place, where we would see play areas, etc. Because one of the things that we had learned was that actually it wasn't the renewal programme itself that the local community was worried about. It was elements associated with where their kids would play, how their kids would be protected from cars which were running obviously alongside the estate itself. The defensible boundaries to keep people safe within their community. And we actually sort of laid out and we showed where new trees would go, where we put a new planting, and we had pop-up banners that actually showed what that might look like, rather than in text, but in photographs that showed the winter and the summer season, so we get an idea of actually what it is that we were going to bring forward. And it actually worked really, really well. And we actually did everything very much more in this sort of graphics approach, dealing with those particular issues, that ultimately when we ended up at committee, we actually had the local residents stand up with placards that wanted planning permission, not a refusal. And that actually was quite useful in dealing with some members along the way as well. Well, I think if you knew me, you'd know that my main hobby is wildlife and landscape photography. And in pursuit of that, I've travelled quite extensively. So in normal circumstances, I think I would probably say the last place that I visited. But actually, from a professional perspective, my favourite place is actually somewhere here in the UK. And it's renowned for its roundabouts, and it's also renowned for its field of concrete cows. So by that I'm meaning obviously the new city of Milton Keynes. But why? Well, Milton Keynes is probably a really good example of what town planners can achieve if they're allowed to get on and do their jobs. It's a place for people. It's a place where pedestrians and vehicles have been segregated. It's a place where there's housing that meets the needs for everybody. It's a place where the commercial, the social, the retail facilities are designed to deal with everybody's needs and requirements. It's also a place where you take urban greening for granted, because everywhere there are ecological corridors that separate each of the development zones and each of the different zones between commercial, residential, etc. But it's also a place where in the morning you can ski on real snow, but you can also water ski in the afternoon on the local lakes. So it's a place that, for somewhere to live, it's got absolutely everything that you could ask for.